reflection to actually do something. What you need is light. What is light? Is it the light at the end of the tunnel? Let's take a look at the word nothing. Nothing. This is the same as nix. Night or no yx. Nix is always associated with cutting something off or eliminating something. So you're going to say the word no, and then we know that the yx or the xy, those are kind of the symbols for our chromosomes. So let's take the word nothing and we'll break it down. The N is going to stand for negate. O is going to be all, or so 0 and 0, O and 0 are the same as in all potential. So all, or because it completes the circuit. T is the cross of manifestation or creation. As a T, we see that in the Phoenician language, for example, the Tau was the symbol, and it was really just a T kind of to the side, which took the shape of an X. The H, the sound of breath. When you exhale, it's that sound. The expiration and inspiration. We see that in Abraham and in Sarai. Abram was the original name of Abraham in the Old Testament, and his wife Sarai, her name changes to Sarah with an H at the end, and Abram, his name changes to Abraham, where we have that H or breath really kind of installed right there. The I is the I of sustaining. The N again was negation, and G is the generative power, like a generator, or like in the word gene or genes, like in the splicing of genes. And if you recall, in the Devil's Playground 2 channel, we did a whole podcast on what a generator was. So why is light a false construct? Using the key above, let's take apart the word light. Without the L or EL, what you're left with is IGHT. And that equates to, if we take the code, sustaining generative power through inspired creation. This proves that we are eternal. We need no God to form us with matter and this fake breath that he talks about. This is why we should not fear night, because there are no Y or X chromosomes to lock us into this false realm. When we are just spirit beings, or the spark, we don't have materiality that's going to hold us down and lock us into this paradigm. So R-ight, right, versus L-ight, light, is there a real difference? Remember, when we used the IGHT, we said that it equated to sustaining generative power through inspired creation. So what does R or L do? Right and left. R identifies the right hand of the Father. We hear about that as being like the one that everyone wants, right? The L identifies the evil, resulting in right and light. The L, like you recall hearing that in the past, even if you wrote left-handed, they'd tie your hand back and swat you until you became right-handed. So use the negation of N and choose night, a middle path. You don't go right, you don't go to the left, you don't become a Democrat, you don't become a Republican. You don't choose. You pick the middle path, which is a non-choice. So let's take a look again at light, as why light is the key. When you look into a mirror, you see yourself, right? You see the opposite. Your right hand becomes your left and so forth. We explained that away. But what are light rays? They are bouncing off that mirror plane, and that is showing here, it's showing your incidence ray where the light's coming in and your reflected ray, light coming out. We see these angles, they are equal angles. The angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection. And then over here with the glass curved, you can still see yourself a little bit, but you can see through it as well, depending on your perspective. So the visible spectrum. From here you can see that this whole electromagnetic spectrum encompasses everything from radio waves all the way to gamma rays. And the wavelength from the left is broad, and as you get to the right, it becomes super, super small, the wavelength. And where is our visible light spectrum? Right in the middle, this less than 1%. How limiting is that 1%? Or less than 1%? It's something like a fraction of 1%. And that just goes to show you that that's why we can't see much. We can see very little, even in comparison to other animals in the spectrum, like let's say the falcon. The falcon can see from miles away, whereas we're limited to how far we can see. So with a lesser amount of visible light, all appears distorted, except for that 1%. And we talked about the they, the hierarchy that enslaves you. Only higher frequency light can allow for more visibility. Or do they really mean exposure, as in like media exposure for the illuminated by the false light? So you hear someone, oh, they're going to get all the exposure. Well, what are they talking about? They're not talking about light to shine truth. What they're doing is they're going to expose whatever agenda they want in order to get their that agenda passed. That's what they mean by exposure, the they. So let's look at the distorted self versus the true self. The mirror that we see, the new one, the screen, the TV, the phone, computer, is the foul, distorted self. The true self is the real you, the reflection of yourself in the regular mirror. And in Shakespeare's work, we kind of get this notion of what you see isn't always what appears, or what appears to be isn't always what it is. So sometimes what you see is foul, and sometimes what you see is fair. And so that's where we get that fair is foul and foul is fair. So the ever-seeing magic mirror, or the mirror, is spoken to in several instances. A lot of people say, oh, say Bloody Mary 3 times, and you'll get a ghostly visitor. Mirror, mirror may be asked, who's the fairest of them all? And what does fair even mean? Fair can be like fair-skinned, just. Fair can also mean like a price that you have to pay to cross. And then it even can sound a lot like the word pharaoh, which is the Latin form of iron. So let's go back to Shakespeare. Shakespeare gave us Macbeth, where we hear that quote, fair is foul and foul is fair, so many times throughout the work. This is magical in its alliteration of F, but also in that Shakespeare is telling the reader that perception and reality are not always the same. And in fact, in most cases, it's the opposite. So you'll see a really nice looking young man, and in reality he is a rapist, murderer, thief. And then you'll see someone who is an old homeless woman, and in reality, she's your fairy godmother. So just remember, perception is not reality. So image. I am a magician, creator. That's what we see in the mirror. Or is it the image, the electronic magic influencer? We already talked about this. You are your own master. No one can make you do anything unless you allow them to. You get this influencer on the right. If he tells you a message enough times, you're going to start believing it. So what do you do? You cut off the media as much as you can. So the negative effects of the elite and their desired influence. What is the desired influence of these elites? Well, we look at this picture on the image on the left, and we see, books are stacked here. Books create the need for imagination. But what happens on this side? Over here we have the gaming system, and the game is the dungeon. This is going to lock you up. There's no creativity and imagination here. Everything's already drawn out and written out for you. So what is their desired? Self-destructive behavior is what their desire is. And I'm not saying that they're going to have you shoot yourself and kill yourself. What I'm saying is their desire is to be that influencer. They're going to tell you that whatever's in the image in the new mirror or the screen, they're going to want you to mimic it. So neuro-linguistic programming. It's all about NLP. NLP, and you can read the definition of neuro-linguistic programming, but it's considered a pseudoscience by mainstream. But you can see here that with the TV screen, a message goes in, there's some kind of distortion, it's generalized, it's distorted, it's deleted, but it still goes into the mind. It's recycled through the psychology and the state, and then from that there's a behavior that ends up coming out. So the TV is the infusion, and then the reaction is what happens when it's gone inside of you. So neuro-linguistic programming, it's not a pseudoscience. It's pretty real, but they would have you believe that it's just make-believe. So NLP, the message is real Israelite, R-elite. It's the word of to be, is, are. I'd like to make it were, no longer, past tense, no more. Thus, you are the slave trapped in the mirror, and we were talking about, let's see what we were talking about, DTM, don't trust mirrors, especially the ones in the department store, especially the ones that are hanging on your wall, that is your TV. And when I did this presentation, DTM was something that my daughter Yassemina said, and she said, DTM, Dad, DTM. And I'm like, what? Don't trust mirrors. And I found that to be very funny. So the end result is your search for the light, or the E-Lite. In the beginning, what you're doing is you're searching. During the end of your life, you may start seeing that light, that chemical reaction happening in your mind, and you're going to be reaching, and you're going to be reaching. Then you may start approaching that light, and then finally you enter that light. And I've told you 100 times, don't do it. But in the event, once you enter that light, then you're in that light. what happens once you're in that light. We've seen this picture many times. This brings you back to the recycled trap of the false elite. Now, they're trapped in here just like you are. I subscribe to this prison planet existence for this spark that's in the meat suit, the meat modem. That wiping of the mind so that we can't recall anything. If this was supposed to be benevolent, this hijacked world was supposed to be something good, we would be allowed to remember. But we're not. So we become men who become old, and then we recycle after death, and then we become infants back to the adolescent young man, and so forth and so on. I don't believe that, well, not to use that word belief, but to expound on knowing. And again, that is why we are using the word Gnostic here, because I don't want to continually talk about things that I believe. That's Crow always uses that term, belief is the enemy of knowing. And it's because belief, if you define it, it's just something that you think. You don't know. What do you know? The only thing you're ever going to know is whatever you physically experience. I experience holding this. I experience meeting someone on the road, how nice they are, how rude they could be. Those experiences are the only truth that we know. Anything that is beyond your perception is not reality. And so, like we've talked about, perception versus reality. How many times do people, and that's the interesting word right there, put on a facade? Because if you define the word people or person, all you're talking about is a mask, a persona, an actor who is on a stage. And that's where we're at. We're on a stage here.